The Spirit of the Vikings. The Royal Norwegian Information Service presents another transcribed program in the series The Spirit of the Vikings. And we have the Army with us today in the studio, for my guest is Staff Sergeant Thor Krogh, Sergeant Major of the 99th Infantry Battalion. We're going to hear about the battalion later. This young Norwegian-American soldier is also editor of the magazine The Viking, which is published twice a month, and he's in charge of the service shows of the battalion. You know, in these shows, the men of the battalion do all the entertaining. But here is Sergeant Thor Krogh. Won't you tell our listeners something about this Norwegian battalion?
The Norwegian Battalion, Mrs. Petch, is our unofficial name. Our official title is the 99th Infantry Battalion of the United States Army.
Why do they then call it the Norwegian Battalion?
Well, the entire personnel of this battalion, from our commanding officer, Major Harold D. Hansen, down to our newest recruit, Ole Larsen, all speak and understand Norwegian. That's one of the musts to be in our battalion.
Ole Larsen. Haven't I heard that name before?
Well, that's very possible, Mrs. Petch. We have 6 Ole Larsens. As a matter of fact, if I remember correctly, there are 32 Andersons, 25 Jensens, 30 Olsens, and 1 Smith.
Smith. Now, that doesn't sound like a Norwegian name.
No, it's not. Smith has the distinction of being the only Irishman in the Norwegian battalion. Through a clerical error along the line, he was erroneously assigned to the 99th. However, he liked it so well that he learned to speak Norwegian fluently. However, he is the exception who proves the rule. Everybody else speaks Norwegian before joining us.
How is one assigned to the Norwegian battalion, Sergeant Krogh?
Anyone can get into this battalion if he is physically qualified, under 38, and speaks and understands Norwegian. Of course, he must be able to endure the hardships of mountain training, sub-zero weather, and long trips into the hills. If he is already in the Army, he can request transfer to the 99th through channels. Civilians need only notify their reception center upon induction that they wish to be assigned to the Norwegian battalion.
Are most of the men in the 99th Americans or Norwegians?
Most of the men are American citizens who were born in Norway. However, we have a number of men born in this country of Norwegian parents. We also have a few men who are Norwegian citizens.
Well, what about yourself, Sergeant Krogh? Where were you born?
Well, Mrs. Petch, jeg er født I Oslo.
Now, just a moment. I'm not sure how many of our listeners understand Norwegian.
Well, I guess I forgot that. We talk so much Norwegian in camp that I very easily fall into the habit of slipping into it, especially since you and I were talking Norwegian on our way to the studio this afternoon. However, as I was saying, I was born in Oslo and came to the United States when I was quite small. Of course, I'm an American citizen now.
Where is your battalion located now? Perhaps that's a secret, a military secret, is it?
No, it's not a secret. We are training now in the heart of the Rocky Mountains, 2 miles above sea level, in Camp Hale, Colorado.
And is that where you've done all your training?
No, indeed. The War Department first activated the 99th at Camp Ripley, Minnesota. There we trained along the banks of the Mississippi. As the battalion grew, we needed more room, so we next moved to Fort Snelling, Minnesota, in Minneapolis. Incidentally, I don't think that any group of men have been so royally entertained by Norwegians as the men when they were in Minneapolis. However, there was vigorous training in store for us, and since Fort Snelling did not afford us the training we needed, we again packed our barrack bags, and moved to our present camp in the snow-covered mountains of Colorado. It's a wonderful place to train. I suppose so many of the men like it because it reminds them of their homeland, Norway. It wasn't long before our ski training was in full swing. Of course, most of the men were at home on their skis. As the old saying goes, a Norwegian first learns to ski and then walk.
Yes, but I notice you call it ski, not she, which is the correct pronunciation.
Well, I've been corrected so many times when I say she that being in a big town like New York, I just say ski and that saves a little argument.
Yes. But I suppose you were a ski expert yourself before joining the Norwegian battalion.
No, unfortunately, I was raised in Brooklyn, where the only skiing is in the newsreels. I didn't learn to ski until I got into the 99th. The first day, our instructor took us up on the mountainside and then very calmly told us to follow him down, a mere drop of some 800 feet. My skis refused to turn the way I wanted them to, and I found myself sailing down the mountain about 50 miles an hour. At that speed, Mrs. Petch, I found myself too frightened to think of how to stop. I hit a little bump in the hill. I then proceeded to sail merrily through the air for about 20 feet, not on the ground but in mid-air. A few seconds later, my instructor found a pair of skis with white pants sticking out of the snow. That was me. But after a while, my ancestral Norwegian came to my rescue, and now I can't keep up with the rest.
That must have been an awfully funny sight. Is skiing the only training that you received up there?
No. There are also men working with dog teams and even mule teams. They, of course, do not do any skiing. It's not an unusual sight to see large dog teams pulling provision sleds through the forests, or mule teams loaded with ammunition and guns winding their way up through the mountains. And of course, when the snow melts, we put away our skis and then practice mountain climbing. Of course, mountain climbing doesn't take so long to learn as is skiing.
It must be pretty hard work.
It is hard work, but we lead a very well-regulated life. To bed at 9 o'clock, up at 5:45. You know the old song, you've got to get up, you've got to get up.
I see. Well, now tell me, do you ski troopers wear a special kind of uniform?
Yes, indeed we do. Camouflage is an important thing in mountain training, and consequently, all our ski clothing and equipment is white in order to blend with the snow. This includes white skis, white tents, and even white covers for our rucksacks. Our rucksacks, incidentally, have been modeled after the standard Norwegian ryggsekk, the best knapsack in the world, with a good steel brace that fits into the small of the back.
With so much training, how do you find time to edit the paper, The Viking?
Well, I often wonder myself, Mrs. Petch. Of course, it's all done in spare time, and when we can sneak away a few hours during the day. Mm-hmm. We think The Viking is one of the finest publications of its kind in the army world. I guess it's because we write it in both Norwegian and English. We usually feature the highlights of the week, such as special training, well-known people who visit us, and also, of course, a good old gossip column dealing with the secret love lives of the men, which isn't too much. Of course, having wax in camp help a great deal.
Are they Norwegian wax?
Norwegian wax? Well, somehow we never find time to discuss national origin when socializing with the wax. Probably because of the time limitations, because it's the old saying again, to bed at 9, even the wax.
Really? Well, what's their costume like?
Well, it's the same costume that you see here in New York City, except, of course, during snowstorms or during extremely cold weather, they wear the old, sort of a parka. If you can visualize an Eskimo parka with fur on it, it's very warm and comes down to about the knees.
It must be very nice looking.
Well, not on the wax.
I see. Well, then, another thing I've learned about you is that you're going to have a book published soon, Sergeant Krogh.
Yes. I expect to have it published within about 6 or 7 weeks. It's a humorous Norwegian book about life in the 99th called Guri og Sverdrup. It consists of email correspondence between Sverdrup, a typical lad of the 99th, squarehead if you please, and his kjæreste or sweetheart Guri, back in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
I'm hoping you're going to send me one when it's published, will you?
I'd certainly feel honored to do that.
Then one more thing I want to know. What do you all do for entertainment out there in the mountains?
Since we are located so far in the mountains, it's very difficult for traveling USO shows to visit us. So I've fallen into the job of writing and producing the battalion shows. My first show, a musical comedy called The Private Life of a Private's Wife, found us without a stitch of women's clothing. Of course, that was before the wax came. And the cast called for 6 evening gowns and 5 ballet costumes. We sent a frantic appeal to New York and received, just a short time after that, elaborate costumes from Lynn Fontaine, Catherine Cornell, and Katharine Hepburn. Oh yes, we also received an abbreviated costume from Gypsy Rose Lee. Since the dresses were small, in spots of course, we had to rip open the entire back to get 6-foot husky ski troopers into them. But that didn't matter much anyway, because the backs didn't show.
Well, that show must have been one of the high moments of the battalion.
Yes, it was. But I think the highest moment of all was when our Commander-in-Chief, President Roosevelt, himself reviewed the Norwegian battalion early this spring.
Why do you suppose the War Department has established a Norwegian battalion in the United States Army?
That part that we are going to play in the Great War is anybody's guess, but I don't think we will be sent to Honolulu. We are all anxious to finish our mountain ski training. We don't want to miss anything. We hope we can soon pack our skis and barrack bags and take a boat somewhere. One of our men who escaped from Norway recently after the invasion said that the motto there is Svina skal ut, or in English, the swine have got to go, and we want to be there to help them on their way.
Well, Sergeant Major Krogh, we thank you so much for taking time out of your short leave to come to the studio today and tell us about the 99th Infantry Battalion. And we all wish you all the very best of luck.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Petch.
Goodbye, everybody.